morning, everybody, and welcome to the latest webinar hosted by the NAF Houston chapter. Before we start, I want to point out that everybody is muted except the speakers. This is intentional because we want to limit disturbances and background noise. However, if you have any questions or you want to share anything, you can use the chat. And questions can go in the Q&A option that you'll find next to the chat. At the end of the webinar, we have a Q&A session, and we'll cover all the questions at the end. So feel free to use that. And then to the topic of today, the NAF and the goal of the NAF, the mission of the NAF is to strengthen the bond between the Netherlands and the US. And we do that through various ways. Education is a big one, scholarships, business, networking. But another one is the arts, which is why we have today's topic, which is Dutch Masters at the Museum of Fine Arts in Houston, and specifically from the 17th century to the present. And our speaker of today is Marianne van Arkel, who is a senior docent at the museum, and she will share with us over the next 4 minutes more about the collection that they have over there. So with that, Marianne, go ahead.
Thank you, Koen. Thank you for the introduction. Welcome, a warm welcome to everybody in Houston that is attending, as well as beyond Houston, because I've heard from someone that there is actually someone in Holland listening in. I would like to welcome you all to this presentation about the Dutch Masters at the Museum of Fine Arts. And of course, the museum is fortunate enough to have a huge collection of Dutch Masters. But for our purposes today, we can, talk about just a handful of Dutch Masters from the 17th century through the present. In addition, I just wanted to let you know that in addition to being a docent at the Museum of Fine Arts, I'm also part of an initiative by the Museum of Fine Arts called the Speakers Bureau. And other docents and I go out to venues and to communities where people are not necessarily have a real good access to the museum. And pre-COVID, we would go there and give our presentations face to face. And nowadays, of course, we're doing this virtually, which has a few advantages to it. First of all, we don't have to beat the traffic, but also virtual tours give us some additional possibilities to view the art. And I will try out some today as well. We can actually, due to technology, get up very close to the art pieces and much closer than you would be able to do inside the museum, because you would make the guards extremely nervous. Before we start, I would like to give you a quick overview of the museum and its development, because that is very closely connected with the sorry, I'm trying to share this with the. My share is not coming up. Okay. Here we go. So the development of the museum, as I said, is very closely connected with the Dutch Masters. We're looking here at the first slide, and this is for those of you who do not live in Houston. This is a photograph of the skyline of the museum district, and in the heart of the museum district we have the Museum of Fine Arts campus. As you can see here up front is the first building, the neoclassical building created by Watkins for the museum, actually for the Houston League at that time in 1920, with extensions over the year, with the Blaffer Memorial Wing, which brought in some offices and a studio school, as well as some badly needed air conditioning. We have the Cullinan Hall here, which was created and designed by Ludwig Mies van der Rohe, and up front we have the Brown Pavilion, which was posthumously built, but also designed by Ludwig Mies van der Rohe. And altogether, this now is one building, and it's called the Curling-Mies Law Building, or Law Building for short. Across the street, you see here the trees here. That is the Gogh Sculpture Garden, which was created in the 70s, actually 1976, by designed by Izumu Noguchi, a wonderful oasis with some fantastic sculptures. Behind there, those rectangular windows are the new Clazel School, which was just opened up 2 years ago with a rooftop terrace and a wonderful venue for both the adult studio school and a junior studio school. On the right side in 2000, we have the Beck Building, the Audrey Jones Beck Building, which houses mainly the antiquities in European art. So this is where we will find many of the Dutch masters. Of course, also abstract expressionism, American modern art, as well as photography. Used to be photography, which moved over here to the new building, our newest treasure, the Nancy and Rich Kinder Building, which was just opened a couple of weeks ago. And we will talk about that more as well. Just to show you a little bit, to give you a quick overview, this is what the area around the museum district looked like in 1924. And this is the first building, which is a two-story neoclassical building, much in the style of the end of the 19th century, larger encyclopedic museums. And this was it. If you look here, these were just regular residential houses left and right. In the 30s, these two wings were added to the building. Of course, there was not a whole lot of money for a larger expansion due to the Depression. After the World War II in the 50s, Ludwig Mies van der Rohe built the Kolonenhal, and today it looks like this with a further expansion of the Brown Pavilion, which has created a huge exhibition space, as well as a auditorium in the basement. And of course, here is a wonderful glimpse of the Cullen Sculpture Garden with beautiful pieces like here at Giacometti, but also Kelly and Matisse and many others. And of course, here is the building that was created by Rafael Moneo and opened in 2000, which, as I said, houses most of the Dutch masters at the moment. These are not air conditioning units, but lanterns, like a lantern kind of open skylights that bring in natural light into the upper galleries. And here, as last but not least, is the Clazel School, the studio schools for, and then also as you know, the Clazel School for to serve the educational part of the museum. And last but not least, the Kinder Building as it looks right now. It's a gorgeous building. Again, you can see here we have some columns here, although they have more of a functional use than actually iconographical use, because these pipes, as you could call them, keep out the heat. It's kind of a buffer to the Houston, Texas heat. All right, the first painting that was created for the museum was not created for the museum, I'm sorry, it was given to the museum by Dixon, George Dixon, was this Anton Wolf. Before that, the Houston Public School Art League, as they called themselves in 1900, was created by 4 women who were teachers at the Houston School District, and they actually purchased, their first purchase was a plaster, a duplicate or an imitation plaster of the Venus de Milo. They purchased it from the Louvre. And in addition to that, they also later on purchased a huge number of posters with Dutch masters to educate the students in the public district. Later on in 1919, of course, they received a collection from Dixon, and the first Dutch master they actually did receive was this Anton Mauve. And Anton Mauve, as many of you know, was a follower of the Hague School, which was kind of like, was like the Barbizon School, who there were a group of artists who actually went outside to paint nature. Before that, I mean, nature in the sense of nature, for the sake of nature. Before, nature was not necessarily painted for its own sake, but more as a backdrop and a background. There were, of course, a few exceptions, but these Barbizon painters and the Hague School painters actually went outside and painted the nature in a very realistic way. They were the precursors to the Impressionists. And here you can see a lovely little, very Dutch landscape with a couple of cows hanging around, and of course some chalks, some Dutch sailboats in the background. Anton Mauve happens to be also a relative of Van Gogh. And he was the one that actually instructed Van Gogh to do oil painting. You know, in 1880, when Vincent van Gogh finally decided to become an artist, he drew a lot. He made many, 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 many drawings, and it was Anton Mauve who instructed him to start in oil. And this is here in front of us is one of the first oil paintings that Vincent created. Of course, like with many people, Vincent had a fallout with Anton Mauve, but he respected him very much. And when Anton Mauve died, he actually created this beautiful cherry blossom tree for Van Gogh and called it, sent it to Theo, his brother, and called it a souvenir de Mauve. Which you can see right now in the Krullenmulde. Both this Van Gogh, this later Van Gogh and the early oil painting are in the Krullenmulde Museum right now. A very important person connected to the museum was Sarah Campbell Blaffer. And Sarah Campbell Blaffer gifted about many old master paintings to the Museum of Fine Art. And one of them was this Frans Hals, and this portrait of an elderly woman, which was created by Frans Hals in 1650. It was one of the, I believe, one of the first gifts of Sarah Blaffer to the museum. And let me look here. I want to show you the actual. Okay.
Sorry to interrupt, Marianne, but there's quite a bit of background noise at the moment. I don't know if there's anything you can do about it. But,
I cannot. I'm sorry. This is my computer working in the background. I hope everybody can you hear me, or is it hard to hear me? Koen?
I can understand you fine. There's just some background
Okay,
noise.
yeah, I cannot do anything about that. I'm sorry. But I'm still sharing this screen with Frans Hals, right?
Yes, you are.
Okay,
Yes.
wonderful.
Please go.
Okay. And this wonderful portrait by Frans Hals. It's an unknown woman. It's a woman, an elderly woman. He calls it an elderly woman, But if you look up here at the painting, you can see it was created in 1650, and he actually was, quite conveniently added the age of the woman to it, which was 62. And I think if there's one thing we can be thankful for living in 2020, it's the fact that all of us that are around that age are not that elderly at this moment, not as elderly looking, at least as this very strong and robust woman from Haarlem, who is, by the way she dresses, quite an affluent lady. You can see the lace cap and the lace cuffs and sleeves on her arms, as well as the fur around her very heavy velvet coat. She was the fashion. She was not. I mean, it was fashion-wise. It was quite a conservative dress, as this collar was called a Miller stone collar, and was held up by wires, and that was not fashionable anymore in 1650. But given the fact that she was a so-called elderly lady, I think that is the reason she still wore that. But she gives evidence of proof of the fact that given the fact that she was from Haarlem herself, that's all we know. We just don't know who she was. Maybe Josine, who I saw was on the participants list, knows more about that. But she definitely represents the textile trade that was flourishing in, so she must have been the wife of a textile merchant, that textile trade that was flourishing in Haarlem in the 17th century. The Sarah Blaffer, the Sarah Campbell Blaffer Foundation has been for a long time almost a museum without walls. And until 2000, when the Museum of Fine Arts opened up the Audrey Jones Beck building, and now many of the pieces owned by the Blaffer Foundation are hanging on the walls of the museum and seamlessly going from one gallery to another. I think they occupy about 5 galleries, including the Cabinet of Curiosities. One of the pieces that I'd like to discuss with you today is this piece, and it's also part of the Blaffer Foundation. It is a Dirk van Baburen, a very Baroque painting. When I say Baroque, the Baroque paintings were, the characteristic of a Baroque painting is that it's very intense, very dramatic, and sometimes very violent. I mean, I say sometimes, very often very violent. If you think of Caravaggio, for instance, or Gentileschi, they put out some very gruesome narratives, both biblical and mythological. And I'd like to show you this story. I mean, you know probably the story of Apollo flaying Marsyas. Marsyas found the flute that Athena had laying around and started to practice on it. Thought he was doing very well, and he challenged Apollo, the god Apollo, to a competition. And Apollo was a very good lyre player, and of course, Marsyas, being satire, lost against the god Apollo, and as a punishment, Apollo was allowed to flame, which he's gladly doing here. I can look up a little closer, and you can see this close-up of Apollo flaying. And when I'm talking about violence, look at this. It's very clearly he is flaying off the skin, and the people here on the right are quite shocked and disgusted, as everybody is. I mean, these are satires, as everybody is looking at this painting. An interesting element of this painting, apart from the fact that it's there's a lot of movement and a lot of action going on, is the fact that the sitter was taken from, the common public in the Netherlands, and it must have been a peasant or somebody that works outside, because if you look at his face and his hands, they are both quite tan, and then you have his the rest of his body is quite quite pale. Another interesting aspect of this painting is the fact that in the Rijksmuseum we have a painting that is called, it's also by Dirk van Buren, it's called Prometheus Being Chained by Vulcan. He painted it in the same year, 1623. And if you look at Prometheus, he's hanging in the same position as Marsyas, and then upside down, kind of like a crucifixion, like the crucifixion of Saint Peter. And it's the same person. It's the same figure. And you might assume that one of these figures were copied into one of the paintings. You see that what the Baroque is doing is creating a narrative that is both religious to a point, but it's combined with ancient mythology. Let's see, the next one. Another very popular genre in the 17th century, and especially in the Netherlands, was of course the still life. And this wonderful still life by Willem van Aalst, which is a hunting still life with a velvet back on a marble ledge, is part of the Blafford collection and is hanging in the Cabinet of Curiosities, and is very hard to see. And fortunately, I can show you this one right here on the website of the Museum of Fine Arts, and it shows a more up close look at this lovely still life. Obviously, hunting was the privilege of the aristocracy only. But the merchants, the upcoming wealthy merchants in the northern Netherlands, wanted to have these small pieces that looked like like the wealth was jumping off of it, and wanted to have those on their walls. Just on a sidetrack, there was a tremendous production of paintings in the Netherlands in the 17th century. First of all, especially Amsterdam was growing due to the newfound wealth, and there were no immigration laws, so everybody who wanted to partake in that wealth and contribute to that wealth came to Amsterdam, and there was a huge demand for housing. Many houses were built both in Amsterdam and Haarlem on the canals. So Amsterdam and Haarlem were under constant construction in those days. But the houses they were building were, although for affluent merchants, they were not large. They were built on a very small footprint because the Dutch didn't want to pay the taxes for a large footprint. So they built up instead of out. And sometimes they had 4 stories, like the canal houses have 3 to 4 stories. But what it meant was that the rooms, the quarters that people lived in, were very small. So there was no space for large furniture pieces. And what they did in order to really show off their wealth, they bought these wonderful small still lifes, which you could sometimes, or very often, buy through an art dealer, which was right over the counter. So this wonderful piece could be bought for a couple of florins right down the street next to the butcher and the bakery. You can see very clearly, it's very precisely and beautifully painted. And you can even see the wonderful leather falcon cap, because the falcon in this case is the hunter. You see the partridge bird hanging upside down with his feathers splattered over the middle of the painting, and the wonderful little fly that wants to make it, that's sitting on the feathers, that makes it even look more realistic. And don't forget this beautiful, sumptuous blue velvet bag of the hunter, together with the silver snaps and buckles. And an interesting item right here on the marble ledge is this pocket watch, which also gives us a look into the scientific advances of the time. And not only was the 17th century the golden age of trade and multinational companies and a huge amount of wealth, but also of technology and new inventions. And the pocket watch was one of those inventions of the time. Another still life was another still life form was the banquet still life. Hold on just a moment, I need to find it. The banquet pieces. And this is a banquet piece by, can you all see that, Koen? Can you see this? The banquet piece by Heda? Okay, good.
Yeah.
And this, of course, is a much larger piece, but a wonderful piece, which is part of the Blaffer Foundation as well. It was painted by William Claeszoon Heda, who lived in Haarlem, and it shows us a tremendous amount of wealth due to this opulence on this table. You know, big piece of ham, this gorgeous silver and pewter utensils, and don't forget these wonderful different kinds of glasses that he was able to depict. You can see here, for instance, the very common wine glass in comparison to this beautiful, fragile Venetian flute, and this very common water glass, which is actually filled with beer, because people would drink beer and not water, because the water was slightly contaminated, or very contaminated. And then here you have this vinegar carafe, which is again a different kind of very fine glass that is completely different from the water glass or the wine glass. The same with the materials used for the plate and the cup, for instance. This is definitely a silver cup, which has a completely different sheen than the more subdued sheen of the tin plates. You can actually see the reflection of the pewter plates, I should say, in the silver cups. You can also see the reflection of a light source that is up here somewhere, as the light comes down, and that is the window up in the top of the studio. And you can see here the reflection of that window in the wine glass, but also here on this can, as well as on a little bit on this sugar bowl or sugar cup. Another interesting thing to point out on this painting is the almanac pieces that are rolled up to hold the pepper kernels here. They were extremely valuable. So not like today, but pepper kernels in those days were had to come from overseas and were very valuable. So as was the salt at the time, and of course also the lemon did not grow in the Netherlands, but had to brought in from overseas. As did this beautiful Chinese bowl, which was probably which came in from China. So what it shows here is a timepiece, and that is what a still life is a timepiece. It shows us that the Dutch in those days were extremely rich. And but on the other hand, the use of the monochromatic colors by William Hayda shows that it's not it doesn't really, the colors are not, it's not just jumping off the canvas. It's the, you know, it's his hyper realism that is so incredible. And don't forget that in 1650 there was no photography, so this must have been miraculous to look at for people in the 17th century. It's quite a simple, as you can see, a very simple composition in a way, because it's purely triangular. And what gives it the dynamic and the movement is, of course, the tablecloth that are pulled from underneath the plates and cups, which makes it look like a chaotic scene. And you wonder what happened here. Well, you could say, okay, there's a guy had too much beer or wine for breakfast, and just fell off his chair and is laying down here somewhere and pulled the tablecloth with him. But it's actually a vanitas, which means, you know, you can indulge in the most material, most wonderful goods on earth, but you can't take it with you. And memento mori, because death will come as abruptly as this tablecloth is pulled away from the table. Okay, another wonderful artist, of course, and our most celebrated artist in the Netherlands is, of course, Rembrandt van Rijn. And Rembrandt here, it is these life-size marriage pendants are not part, of course, of the Museum of Fine Arts. Actually, they're jointly owned by the Louvre and the Rijksmuseum, and were both on view last year during the Rembrandt year in the Rijksmuseum in Amsterdam. And the reason I'm showing you this is because of this figure here on the right. This is Opium Coppet, married to Martin Solms. And if you look very carefully at her facial features and her dress, like up until the upper part of the body. And then I'll show you this piece here. This is our Rembrandt. This is the Rembrandt of the Museum of Fine Arts, which was, as you can see, is extremely valuable because all these people and institutions and organizations had to throw money into the head in order to purchase this piece. And it's well worth it. It's a beautiful piece of art. It's a true Rembrandt. He made it he created it in 1633 at the beginning of his career. And you can already see why people were so fascinated by Rembrandt at the time. And one of these fascinations, of course, is this very intimate relationship that he must have had, you know, the sympathy he had for this sitter, Opium Coppet. You can actually almost feel it. And the intimacy, he creates that through the use of a very stark background and a very illuminated foreground, which he uses the Italian chiaroscuro technique, where the background is black. and the foreground is quite is very bright. So he works from black or dark to light. And if we look this up more closely at the at our website here, you can see how different the face is painted versus the double color lace. You can see it is immaculately executed, the face, with these their oval face and the beautiful red hair. You can see the remnants of the lace cap and the pearl earrings, eardrop earrings, as well as the lovely string of pearls. But if you look at the face and then look closely at the lace, you can see it's a completely different style. He combines a much lighter brush stroke with a very a more a more precise brush stroke and a lighter stroke. Here he uses much more impasto, thicker layers of paint. And it gives all a feeling more of spontaneity in an otherwise fairly rigid painting or portrait. So this is a very wonderful piece by Rembrandt, and I think we all can agree it is worth its weight in gold, more than that, I should say. Rembrandt, of course, and now we're jumping forward to another 200 years. Rembrandt, of course, had a large influence on another Dutch master, which was Vincent van Gogh, which we have here. And the reason I'm saying he had an influence on Van Gogh is because
sorry to interrupt, but we are seeing the portrait of the young woman.
There we are.
Yeah, there we
go. Perfect, thank you. If you look at this very early painting by Van Gogh on the right, the head of a peasant woman, and you look at our young woman by Rembrandt, 200 years before that, you can see that Vincent is trying to create this same intimacy by using the chiaroscuro technique, but also if you look at the lace of her collar, of Rembrandt's collar versus Van Gogh's cap, you can see that Van Gogh was really trying to create this similar kind of effect. And this was clearly influenced by Rembrandt. Another one is, I've got the potato eaters, which are not at the Museum of Fine Arts, but at the Van Gogh Museum in Amsterdam. And if you look clearly, this is Gorgudina de Groot again, and her family in Nuenen eating their potatoes. It's a very dark and gloomy, and this is the way he painted in the mid 19th century, in the mid 80s of the 19th century. And it's, if you look at an earlier painting by Rembrandt, the Supper at Emmaus, you can see that Rembrandt used very similar composition for his potato eaters. If you look at the arch here of the structure versus the arch here of the peasant's cabin, or the light source here at the potato eaters, and the light source, of course, here that came from the Christ figure. And you also look at the figure that is standing here with her back towards us. You can fairly easily see that it's a very similar figure to the one that Rembrandt created. So 200 years later, Rembrandt still had a marvelous, a very strong influence on many artists, including Van Gogh. This painting is the Rocks. It is by Van Gogh, and we have it in the Museum of Fine Arts. It is a gift by Audrey Jones Beck, and it is a wonderful piece to look up close. How do you all see the rocks here up close? This is the painting up close. You can see that this is a painting full of movement, and although he uses very short strokes, apart from, of course, the sky, the tree trunk is a zigzag green line. The foliage is all little dabs of different greens and a little bit of color here against an empty sky with some subtle colors. But this tree is absolutely battered by wind, and it is enforced by the fact by how he paints all the different grasses. They go left and right, and they are flattened, and they have an incredible movement due to his use of impasto and the very thick layering of colors and dabs of colors that he brings onto the canvas. Just imagine, he painted this piece in Arles, Van Gogh did, and it was just outside of Arles. There was a monastery called Montmajour, and as you know, the Arles gets quite a bit of Mistral, the Mistral winds, sweeping through there, and he was painting this outside. So just imagine Van Gogh sitting here in front of this little oak tree with his easel, stuck into the ground, anchored into the ground, and his paint brushes, his paint tubes, and standing there trying to fight his canvas blowing away from the wind. It was quite a difficult adventure, and we know that because he wrote about it and complained about it to his brother Theo. Also, he had, of course, the light was very bright, and so he had to kind of use a parasol in the wind in order to keep his eyes from from getting too much brightness or creating too much creating true colors, because if you paint something outside and you bring it back indoors, it might look actually quite drab. And this painting really still has a lot of brightness to it. Okay, the next painting I'd like to discuss with you is another Dutch artist, Kees van Dongen. It's also in the Audrey Jones Beck building. And Kees van Dongen, this is called the Corn Poppy, and it's obvious why. This is this wonderful, very bright red cap on a yellowish, orangey ochre background, which makes it pop, almost pop off the canvas as if it were 3D, especially intensified by this shadow of the head in the background. She has these beautiful almond, very heavily made up eyes, and a very fragile but quite a confident attitude that's jumping off the canvas here. She was a typical woman of the time between World War I and the Depression and World War II. There was a time of relative freedom for women, and she was a very confident personality. It was actually Kees van Dongen's sister, and Kees van Dongen was a follower of the Fauve movement, which is a post-impressionist movement which jumps off from impressionism and pointillism and creates these very vibrant colors and and goes away much more from realism into abstract painting. And talking about abstract painting, we have another Dutch artist who settled in New York. That was Willem de Koning. He actually was a stowaway in the 1920s on a boat that was on its way to Argentina, and he actually landed somewhere in New Jersey and stayed in the US, became a naturalized citizen at one point. And he, of course, is an absolute abstract painter, and he was very much influenced by Hans Hofmann and Jackson Pollock, who were the who carried the abstract impressionist movement in New York. And as you can see, this is normally, he does not, like many of the abstract expressionists, normally doesn't title his work. But in this case, he titled it Back Porch. So you can see all the people that are looking, viewing this painting, looking at it, and very often people are looking for this back porch and this darn back porch that they cannot find. So Willem de Koning is kind of playing a little trick on everybody, because there really is no back porch. And in his mind, when you stop looking for the actual representation, or you're trying to find a figure, some sort of reality, that's really when the fun begins. And then you can really start looking at the painting itself, because really what he's trying to do is show us the how important the paint is in painting a piece of art. You can see how the light of the white is splashed over some of the original colors that were brought out before. It's a pull and push technique, which creates this very interesting and very abstract expressionist effect. He painted this in the Hamptons. He moved from New York to the Hamptons permanently in the 60s. And the reason he did is because it reminded him of the light that he experienced during his childhood in Rotterdam. So another Dutch master that we are fortunate to have.
Marianne, we have, I just logistic one. We have 10 minutes left.
Okay, no problem. I'm going through these very quickly, these last ones. This is Peter Mondrian, also moved to Paris first and then to the United States. And he's definitely, I mean, we probably need to talk to him about him a little longer, but he became a completely abstract artist. He started off as painting landscapes, and was more, he decided that spirituality has nothing to do with reality, and he limited himself to only the three primary colors, the three values, which are black, gray, and white, and the two lines, which are horizontal and vertical. So enough about painting. So let's look at this one, which is the Red Chair by Peter Mondrian. And everybody knows this very iconic chair. This one, actually, you can buy kits of Rietveld chairs and put them together yourself. But this one is one of the original ones that came from the estate of the Rietveld family. And another wonderful new artist and designer is, of course, Joris Laarman, of whom the museum had a wonderful exhibit a couple of years ago. He creates these pieces with the use of 3D copiers. And he actually has been working on a bridge over a canal in Amsterdam in his lab, which is also in Amsterdam. I'm sorry we don't have more time, but I suppose this is the end of our Dutch masters from the 17th century to the present. Most of the last three that I showed you, Mondrian and Rietveld and Laarman, are all in the Kinder building, in the new Kinder building. And at some point in time, if you're interested, we can do a webinar that is completely dedicated to the Kinder building. So thank you all. And I'm signing out and bringing myself in. I'm signing the presentation out and coming back into view. Thanks a lot.
And thank you, Marianne, for taking the time and sharing your knowledge. We have a little bit time left and we have a few questions. And I think the first one is everybody just able to come and visit the museum and at this time with COVID going on?
Yes, it is open, but you need to buy a ticket online.
Okay.
Because they only sell so many tickets per day, because they can only have a certain amount of people at one time. But yes, the museum is open.
Okay, so everybody, if this sparked your interest, you're able to go there. And another question is, how many pieces of Dutch art do you have? How big is the collection?
I have not counted them.
But are we okay? Are we talking how much roughly?
I think if you will have to count the pieces that belong to the Blaffer Foundation and the ones that the museum owns. I honestly cannot tell you. I have no idea. But I'll look it up.
We have another question, which is from Ralph, which is, what is your favorite piece in the museum?
My favorite piece in the museum. That's difficult. I like the Koning a lot because I like the fact, that you really have to work in order to get an idea of what he's trying to do. It's much different from a Dutch still life where you have a representation of everything you see. And abstract art gives you, you have to use your brain and your emotions to get an idea of what his purpose is. So yes, I think I like the back porch.
The back porch, yeah. All right. We have a little bit time left. What can you tell something about the popularity of Dutch art in the US, here in the US, now and in the past?
I think the Dutch 17th century art has always been quite popular in the US. I also notice it on tours. People always would like to see the Dutch masters. And current art is basically the designers are very popular in the United States. And just those, like there are quite a few designers we have that I haven't mentioned that are also quite popular. Design Milk, for instance, the jewelry designers, the furniture designers, and all that. We have a large collection of those as well.
Mm-hmm. Right. I got one more question, which was, can other people also get access to the website where you showed the art? Can other people use it as well?
Yes, all you need to do is go to MFAH.org, which is the website of the Museum of Fine Arts Houston, and you click on collections, and then you, for instance, put in Van Gogh in the search bar, and then it comes up with, several pieces of Van Gogh, mostly drawings, but also, for instance, the rocks that we just saw. And then you can actually click on the picture, and if you click on you click through the pictures of the rocks, and then you actually get to where you can go and zoom in and out. You just have to play around with it. But yes, it's accessible to everybody.
Great. All right. So if people are staying in for COVID, you can still experience.
That's right. You can actually see more of the art. It's not, live, but you can actually see, you can go deeper into the artworks than you could actually do while standing in front of them.
Yeah. And I think the one that you showed, the rocks from Gogh, really shows that, where you can really see how thick the brush strokes are and how thick he applied his paint. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Right. Very, very nice. Those were the questions. So thanks again, Marianne, for your time and for taking the time to present this. And I think we can invite everybody to go and experience it live in the Houston Museum of Fine Arts.
Yeah,
I also wanna-
and go see the Kinder building.
and go see the new Kinder building.
Right.
I also want to thank Laura and Floortje from the NAF in New York for helping us set this up, and everybody for attending. I hope you learned something. I hope it inspired you to go and see it, see some art. And this is the last webinar we are doing this year. If you enjoy our events, I want to also invite you to join the NAF. You can go to our website, become a member, or choose to donate if you want to support the cause, like the arts and everything, supporting the bond between the Netherlands and America. Next year we'll be back. We'll have some more webinars. One of the first ones will be an update on the travel options and limitations with COVID. So we have another one on that. We'll present some data of that soon. And we're also to look if we can start moving to some live face-to-face events if COVID allows it. So I think everybody's ready to see some people face-to-face. And if we can do that safely, everything allowing, we'll do that too. So more information on that soon. This is the end of the webinar. Again, thanks for attending. Have a great day, and hopefully till next time in the new year. And have a great holiday. Bye-bye.
Thank you all. Have a great holiday season. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.